Aloha, everybody, and welcome to UFO Secret Space. And I'm your host, Janet Lessin. And tonight we have a very special interview with Richard T. Knight. And I'm not going to talk a lot because I want to shift this focus to Richard. Anybody wants to know about me, go to aquarianradio.com. I have a bio there, but we have a longer show page for Richard, some pictures and things. So without further ado, Richard Knight, welcome to UFO Secret Space.
Thank you, Janet. I appreciate it. I really appreciate being here with you, especially considering this is Christmas Day. But that
yes.
just enlightens and makes it even more positive as to the message going out.
Yes, this is Christmas Day, and I almost forgot about that. It is Christmas Day. It's been a long day for me, but it's a great, wonderful, and powerful time of year. So this is quite appropriate that we have Richard T. Knight on Christmas Day. So I want you to start, first of all, an overview. I know you've got some degrees and background as an adult, but then we're done with the overview. We're going to go back to in the beginning to your birth and any memories you have about coming here or making the decision. A lot of people have memories about, not a lot, but some people have memories of deciding to come here and what their mission is, but some don't discover that until much later in life, but you might be aware of it. So first of all, overview. Who is Richard Knight? Your bio.
Well, Richard Knight basically has two loves in life. One was law, and the other one basically being spirituality. So I basically started out receiving degrees to back up my licensure as a licensed private investigator, a licensed special investigator, and I had contract work with the government, and I had contract work with the state, and I had contract work as a consultant to many given well-known individuals. And so I started out very early because I began my internship with a very well-known detective agency in California, which I'm a native of California, having been born in Santa Monica. 2 years, at which time I branched out with my mentor's approval to create my own detective agency, which was a sole proprietorship. So it gave me complete control over what I got into and what I didn't get into. And oftentimes I would be doing investigations on the side of corporate positions such as director of security, director of loss prevention. One of the big highlights was I was director of security for the Charleston Naval Hospital for a couple of years. Boy, was that gig quite a handful. I had 25 officers, and we had 5 acres of property. We had an outside pharmacy, and there were bungalows where actually naval personnel could live on the property. So that was a handful and a half, challenge-wise. But I was also trained by NCIS in anti-terrorist tactics, and in case the hospital ever became under threat and that kind of thing. And then I've worked for a councilman at large. I've worked for judges. I've worked for lawyers, freelance, both in the civil and the criminal arena. And I have always been against corruption and against malfeasance of office. I've arrested a judge while he was sitting bench in a live courtroom with 60 witnesses where he openly took a bribe, witness of myself and witness of a U.S. Marshal who was in a company with me. And so I arrested him live on the bench, and we took him into custody. And so that was quite a craziness. Basically,
I can imagine that one.
Overall, I have always fought for the underdog. I have always represented people in need, regardless of whether, I benefited by it or not, because my whole purpose was basically in the helping of others. That's where I derived my pleasure and my joy, regardless of whether, I was benefited financially or not. And looking back, I did quite a few things when I was young that I wouldn't even attempt to get away with today because it just wouldn't happen. Rules have changed, and so has our society as time's gone by.
Yes, it has indeed.
Yes. Now, at the same time, around that same period of time, I became an ordained minister. I was a youth counselor for a kind of a mission kind of setup where we did counseling for runaways, counseling for youth that had become drug addicted or just got caught in very bad situations. And then I went from there and eventually became an actually ordained Eastern Orthodox Coptic Egyptian bishop with the Diocese of the U.S., and I also founded a seminary and church in New Orleans, Louisiana. And from that aspect, I also received a doctorate in theology from the University of Cairo through the Coptic Studies Center. And I also have a doctorate in divinity, a doctorate in religious science, and a doctorate in metaphysics. And then in turn, my law enforcement career was backed up with an associate's, a bachelor's, and a master's degree in criminal justice. So I have interworked basically these two fields the majority of my life, taking very little time off because naturally, as you might imagine, where one picked up, the other one left off, and where one left off, the other one picked up. So it was a very, very interesting life because then on top of all of this, as though that's not enough, there is also the spiritual side of things. So I've been a paranormal investigator. I have been a psychic intuitive reader. I am a Reiki Grand Master. And so that has been mainstream as well. But that's kind of low-key in aside of the other two that are more, generally recognized in societies, locations or what have you. Because the psychics and the paranormal have always been kind of the illegitimate step studies up until, of course, the last 20 years where there's been a great deal of recognition made. And, of course, it's not quite a pseudoscience, but it's getting there.
Well, it sounds like you lived about 20 lives in just that one part. So I want to unpack your life because it's been an incredible life, and you're not done yet. You've got a long way to go. So. Oh yeah. Definitely. I'd like you to go back to your birth and your birth story. And if you do have any recollection, if not, that's fine. Most people don't. We come into the veil full on. But you said in a little outline that you had no lost knowledge as to who you were and where you came from, and you came in with 14 senses with no separation from source. So there's a lot there. How did you have no lost knowledge? What happened that the veil didn't get you and you were in your memory erased? And what are the 14 senses? Most of us only have 5. So go ahead, take that away. All right. Well, basically, yes, I do have a recollection. Now, I would say that this was garnered and released to me over time. It is not something that I had instantaneous knowledge of, but I was born with a veil, which, of course, the gypsies say is someone born with the third eye or their third eye is wide open. And the veil, of course, is the amniotic sac that we're all born from or that carries us through our mother's womb. And then in turn, of course, usually comes out separately either after or before the child is actually expelled from the womb. In my instance, the sac was actually covering 2/3 of my body. And as my body was pulled out of the womb, the sac remained covering my eyes and upper forehead and that aspect of my physical self. So because that veil was in place, that basically allowed to keep intact what you would call the spiritual connection or the resource of being in one with a God presence. As far as actual memories, yes, I do know that I came in from the 16th dimension, which I know that's going to sound rather far-fetched because most people are not all aware of the dimensions that are around. And I have come to know that over time there are actually about 28 of them. And basically dimensions as far as that is concerned, the higher the dimension, the more godlike you become in reference to there is a non-corporeality of your being, and your essence is basically pure energy, and your thought consciousness is basically pure love. And there is no conflict of any kind or anything like that. So basically when I came down here... about that. Hold your thought there. So there's 28 dimensions, is that what you said? And you were in the 16th. Yes. What in the world were you doing coming down to the 3rd? I mean, really? Was that a good idea or what?
I was here on a mission. Basically, I was told that, man had been at this particular turning point 3 times previously in their history. And this was the 4th time. And it was, the advent of man has basically arisen consciously wise and vibrationally wise to the point that we're at now in regards to making the choice to become basically a consciously aware or Christ conscious or universally conscious aware being while still physically incarnate. And this has happened, like I said, 3 previous times in our history, going quite back some ways from here where we are now. And so I have a great deal of Earth history, and I have a great deal of past lives. I know that I've been here over 100,000 times. So this has been an ongoing thing where not only has it been personal self-development, but it has also been to assist others in whatever capacity and manner I can.
So you have an affinity for the Earth, and you like coming here. So that's a lot of times to come here. Have you been to other planets and other dimensions?
And sure. And the thing of it is, we're not limited to one physical being or one conscious awareness in any one given dimension or one given planet in any given time. I know for a fact that I am also currently alive and well in another body in the Pleiades. So there's another me out there in another star system at the identical time as this life is coming to pass. Now, no, I do not have a lot of conscious interaction with that particular aspect of me. But I would say that my higher self, which basically you could say is more or less our as close to God consciousness as we can arrive at, that basically is like our internal supervisor that supervises all that we're doing in all the various dimensions, all the various planets, galaxies, etc., as well as what we're going through here on Earth. And they are like a big brother, big sister kind of mode. They kind of give you hints that, hello, you don't really want to do that. And they can put more emphasis on it than purely just your intuition, simply because you feel a resonance throughout not only your whole body, but also in your all of your chakras, your energy centers, and your higher heart. So it's much more persuasive than your intuition alone. Now, you had asked in regards to what 14 senses I came in with. Well, if you consider the 5 senses, there is a psychic ability that is attached to each of these 5 senses. For example, touch. Physical touch naturally allows us to touch objects, touch people, and so on and so forth. Well, the psychic equivalent is called psychometry, where a person can lay their hands upon a picture or any physical object and know the entire history of that picture or that object. So that's a psychic sense or equivalent to the touch. Hearing, of course, is called clairaudience, and basically it allows you to hear sounds that most people don't hear, as well as conversations going on around you in the spirit realm. And so basically when I came in, I was very much aware that there were a whole lot of entities in the room that were not of physical corporeal form. So I could hear them, I could see them, and of course sight is what I'm describing really is called clairsentience. In other words, the ability to ascertain or know that there are other physical or energetic entities in a room, in a house, in a building, in a cemetery, et cetera, so that's clairaudience, clairvoyance, because naturally I can see, and clairsentience, which is the ability to sense, which of course we have that basically, you would call it's our gut instinct. In other words, we have an internal warning system that says, hey, you shouldn't really go there, or you shouldn't really do this, because if you do, things might not be so good. And they don't necessarily tell you all the details. They just give you a very strong warning. And fortunately, this has saved the lives of lots of people. They go to board a plane, and all of a sudden they get this internal warning system saying, no, you don't need to do this. You need to wait for another flight or whatever. And then, of course, later on they learned the plane they would have been on crashed. That's just an example.
Yeah.
So you've got sight, vision, Vision, hearing, touch, smell. Okay, sometimes spirit will come to you and they'll try to remind you of a past relationship, whether it be an ancestor, whether it be someone that you know, a past loved one in this life. You'll smell a certain perfume or you'll smell a certain scent, and it'll remind you of that given individual, whether it be something they were cooking or whether it be a cologne they wore and this kind of thing.
Or their favorite flowers,
and then, of course,
or stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, in addition to that, let's see, the last one is taste, okay? And taste can be rather strange because taste oftentimes happens when you're not actually physically eating anything. All of a sudden, you'll just get this certain taste in your mouth as though like, well, wait a minute now, I didn't eat a candy bar, but why am I tasting chocolate? So anyway, that's those 5, all right? Then you add to them the ability to levitate, all right, which is basically the defiance of gravity, because your spiritual will is stronger than the gravitational pull of the earth upon your body, because you actually will your body to be light and more etheric in form, and therefore there's nothing that can hold it in place. Telekinesis, the ability to move objects with the will of your mind, okay? And then the ability to scry or to give readings, such as psychic impressions, use tarot cards, scry by fire, and these kind of things. And then also dream aspect is very strong as well, by having vivid dreams in which you actually take control of your dream and interact in the dream. And this also includes astral projection, because that's also kind of like a dream state. But we also, all of us go to the astral plane nightly, and 90% of us don't remember that we've been there. So that rounds out the 14. And
that's
of course, there are other sundries that have come in and out on occasion, as needed, as they say.
Well, I had a lot of that too. So you have that written up. That's wonderful. That should be part of your book. You know, here's how you could have 14 senses. Now, the other question I had was the 28 dimensions. Is there? Have you written or no? Well, how many were 28? Has that been written up by you or anyone else? And what are the differences between the different dimensions?
Up till now, all the esoteric systems. Yeah, all the esoteric systems up until now basically have outlined in format 22 dimensions to date. And I've become consciously aware, having traveled at very sporadic moments to all 28 of these dimensions, and that's why I can attest that I know for a certainty that there are 28 and not just 22. But no, I have not put pen to paper in reference to that as of yet. That's probably a book on down the ways.
Sounds awesome. Okay, so then, and then you had no separation from source. So I've had a couple of people that had full memory and they were aware of all their past and simultaneous lifetimes. But my one friend, Jillian, said, well, of course you got to focus on where you are. So be here now, but you have an awareness of your other existences in past lives.
Yeah, I mean, I knew the very last past life that I had in great detail. You know, I was a Civil War captain. I was a Confederate soldier. I had been an actual doctor in the community at the time that I was enlisted. You know, grabbed hold of and said, hey, you know, we need you because you can serve us in two different ways. Naturally, you know, you have leadership skills, so you can lead a command of soldiers, but at the same time, you also have doctoring skills, so that in the event that we're in an encampment and we have wounded, you can treat the wounded. And I said, well, yeah, it sounds good to me. And I've always been kind of a rebel person anyway. It's not that I don't agree with rules, it's that I just feel that the rules sometimes need to be bent, because sometimes there are exceptions to the rule, you know. And the rules, I mean, if we didn't have rules, we wouldn't have a society, we wouldn't have an ability to communicate with each other in a calm fashion. And, you know, we wouldn't have courts of law to prosecute individuals or to bring matters before a judge so that they can be decided and a decision handed down in a lawful manner. And of course, we have a government that rules us, which is organized for the most part. And so that's where laws come in. That and the fact that I've also been an immigration inspector for 4 years with the Department of Justice before Homeland Security came into play. And I've also been a state probation officer for 6 years. And that was in dealing with juveniles, because I figured, well, you can't turn adults around, because most of the adults you're going to see as a probation officer or parole officer in the adult section of things, they've already been to prison for 5, 10, 20 years. And by going into prison, they actually become worse than before they had actually gone into prison, because prison basically elicits its own private society where, people that had committed small crimes before now are elicited to and taught how to commit even worse crimes when they get out. And that's why we have such a huge recidivism rate. So anyway,
let's stay on your timeline.
That on top.
Let's go back to time. Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Okay. All right. So coming in, like I said, I was very much aware, and I freaked the doctor out because he spanked me on the ass, and I grabbed his arm and said, "Do it again, and I'll break it." Now, of course, as you well know, normally speech is not developed in an infant for quite some time, and that just is another sign that I was completely aware. And as far as being conscious, I like to look and have always looked upon God or source as being both a god and a goddess, both equal participants. And when you think about it, it kind of makes good sense, because why? There are male and female entities here on the earth. So why wouldn't it make sense that you would have a mother and father as source? Because actually, when it comes down to it, it's the mother that's far more active than the father, because the father has sort of the power, and he gives his power into the hands of the mother, so that the mother in turn can school her children and get them out of trouble and be compassionate towards them and so forth. The shame is that, of course, the mother side of things has been downplayed, because we've been soliciting, and embroiling people in the concentrated fact that, hello, this is a male-dominant society. Well, that's very true, but from an alchemical standpoint, we are all male and female genetically.
Right.
I mean, this is a scientific fact, and alchemy basically is the path that one takes to balance and harmonize both your male nature and your female nature within your physical self and also your spiritual self. So
who was your mother this lifetime and your father? Did you choose them before you came, and are they the people that raised you? Tell us your story of birth. We're still at the birth.
Okay. No. Basically, I did not choose who they would be, because I was already committed with the fact that I was not going to in any way forget that I was connected to Mother and Father God. So physical parents were only a very small substitute. My mother, who actually gave birth to me, tried to drown me in the ocean at 6 months old. The reason being, my physical face reminded me almost identically to the man that had she had an affair with. So basically, by looking at me, she was looking at the man that she had this affair with, and her parents were strict Roman Catholic, and of course, to have a child out of wedlock was a big no-no. So they were giving her all kinds of grief over me and everything else. Well, there was never a cemented relationship or bond between my mother and myself. There was only a psychic one. And as far as a dad is concerned,
so she tried to drown you.
Yes, she threw me. She threw me into the ocean, and what I like to term the goddess of the sea, basically picked me up out of the waves and put me back in her arms. And basically, about 3 months after that, she had a complete mental breakdown and was institutionalized. So as a result, my grandparents put me in foster care. And I went to foster care with a Spanish family that had 6 chihuahuas. And they treated their chihuahuas like children, so I was kind of like the last runt of the litter. Even though I was human, I was still competing with these dogs for attention and affection. So my taste of humanity was very, very jarred, very, very rough at first. Now, eventually, I did reunite, of course, when my mother came out of the institute. We reunited for a bit, And in turn, she and I would stay up all night and watch monster movies and the old horror
How
classics
old were you
and that
when
kind
you
of
got
thing.
reunited? Let's try to put a time to these things at age.
Okay,
How old
I'm
were
sorry.
you when
I
you got
was
reunited with your mother?
all right, probably about 3.
I just want to try to give about
sure.
3
I went into foster care
before you're 7, so these are very critical years for your development
yes.
as a human.
I went
went
into foster care approximately at 7 months old. Okay, I was reunited with my mom at 3 years old, and about 3.5, I was institutionalized in a Catholic boarding school. And I was kept in a Catholic boarding school, indoctrinated, given the first Holy Communion and all that. Now, as you might imagine, with a child that has 14 senses and all kinds of psi abilities, the nuns and the priests thought for certain I was the son of the devil. And they just didn't know how to handle me. So their reaction was to isolate me in a library. Well, that was all fine and good because the library was upstairs in another building off by itself. And the only time I interacted with my fellow students was to run in the field, run after butterflies or run after dragonflies. That was my main thing. And, of course, they didn't want to put me in class because since I could read minds, I already knew the answers before they asked the questions. So that was also an annoyance in class. So they decided they'd go ahead and isolate me. Well, there was one afternoon in the day, and I want to say that I'm approximating that I was around 5 years old, okay? And I was swinging on a swing, because I remember this most distinctly. I was swinging on a swing. It was dusk, and the sky was just growing dark. And my intention was to swing high enough to be able to touch the leaves and branches of a tree that was sitting not far away from the swing set. So as I managed to touch the branches of the tree, a huge white light came out of the sky and kind of like put me in a spotlight kind of situation. And the next thing I knew, I was no longer on the earth. I was in the belly of a mothership. And I was not alone. As I looked around, there was probably a couple dozen other children around my same age. And the beings that basically were claiming to have taken us were the Arcturians. And the whole reason I had been brought aboard was so that in turn tracking devices could be put in my nasal passage and another one in my etheric body, because they were very interested to see how much rejection I would get from the human populace that would surround me as I was, and in turn, this was kind of like
Did they call themselves Arcturians by name? Did they?
No.
How did you know they were Arcturians?
This information came about much later in life, in actuality, after some serious investigation on a psychic and spiritual level, with the assistance of an enlightened master who lives in Jordan, which is right next to Israel. And he's the one that actually identified exactly who they were. Now, the agreement was, and I say this was a mental agreement, intuitively spoken between us and intuitively accepted on both ends, and I was to have this tracking device in my nasal passage until I was 17. Well, unfortunately, at 17, this is skipping forward quite a bit, but I just want to continue the story in this tracking device. I went to a party, and someone got very terse with me, and we were having words, and we decided we would settle things outside. Well, I did one of the stupidest things you could ever do, and that was to follow them outside. So basically, as they had gotten outside and the door was closing in front of me, as I opened the door, I got sucker punched in the nose, which broke my nose. And I don't know if it was because my nose was broken and the delicacy of the surgery that might be entailed in removing the tracking device, in addition to having to resolve this broken nose. I don't know if that interfered with things, but anyway, they left the tracking device in, and basically for the next 18 years, I had a severe problem in breathing through my nose at times. So anyway,
I had the same thing with the damn tracking device they put in my, especially the right side of my nose, and so when I grew up, I had to get additional surgery. Did you have to get additional surgery when you were an adult?
Yes, actually, when I was working for immigration, I had very fine insurance, and I went and had a nasal reconstructive surgery. And when the man pulled out this very round ball with kind of a sphere, an extensive edge around the center of it. When he pulled it out of my nose, of course, he put it off and he sent it off to the lab, and the lab came back with the results the metal could not be identified. And then, mysteriously, when I tried to follow up with the doctor to see if I could get any more details, he said after I'd been released from his care, the men in black showed up out of nowhere and took the metal object into their possession, and they were gone and never heard from again.
Wow. So when I was, let's see how old I was. Maybe, I think it was 24. I got the rhinoplasty reconstruction of my nose. Because all my childhood I kept getting polyps because this damn thing was up my nose and my body was trying to protect me from this thing. But you know what? They probably took it. They didn't tell me they got anything. But I knew it was going because I remembered them putting in, just like you did. You remember them getting it. I didn't remember any contract like you did, like they're going to take it out at a certain point. It was just in. I remember getting it. I remember being on the ship. I didn't know they were Arcturians, but I could have had different ones. I didn't even really see the beings. They kept out of sight. Anyway,
well,
I'm not focused on me. Yeah, but go ahead.
No, but mine were up close and personal. In other words, I saw gray beings, I saw blue beings, I saw green beings, and it was actually the green beings that actually did the implanting. So, I mean, we have many, many, many races that have been interacting with mankind for a very, very long time. And, of course, I have not done a complete and thorough study of our ET brothers and sisters, other than to say, I'm very much aware of the galactic planetary agreement, you could say, the Galactic Federation of Planets. And, of course, we have galactics. Currently, there are thousands of ships surrounding the Earth that have been remaining camouflaged for quite some time, but yet, again, they're starting to show themselves more frequently because more and more people are beginning to actually see them, interact with them, videotape.
Well, I expect
anyway,
that you're going to have more activity with them because we're going through some interesting times. So let's go back to your childhood. So you have this experience on board the ship.
Right.
You get the tracking device.
Right.
And when you returned, you were a savant of many languages. And your great-grandmother ended your life. So tell us about being a savant of languages and your great-grandmother entering your life.
Well, becoming a savant of languages, I could read, write, and speak fluently 14 different languages. And this proved to be a great assistance to me because most of the books upstairs in the library were written by other scholars and adventurers and so forth, and 90% of them were all in a foreign language other than English. So I became this vast, explorative, curious warehouse of information from many of these books. Because the library, the hall in which the library was contained was about 12 foot tall and approximately 60 foot long by about 30 foot wide. And there was not a wall in the place that did not contain shelves of books. That's how many books had been gathered there.
How did you come to know how to read in the first place, any language, and then you came back when you were 5, and you're still in this orphanage, right, or this facility?
Right. Right. Yeah.
So you're suddenly
Catholic boarding school.
So suddenly you're reading all these languages. How did you learn to read in the first place? What was that process?
I just knew.
So you just had a knowing.
There were times, yes, and there were times where I would be interested in a book, and I would decide, well, I don't really feel like reading that much today, so I'm going to have the book talk to me. So I would place the book between the palms of my hands, and basically the story of the book would come to me intuitively, without even having to turn the page.
Ah, I see.
So
that
skill was utilized quite widely. And then there were other times, like, for example, Latin I probably spoke and knew fluently in past lives. And there were other languages such as French and German and Belgian and Russian that, again, all related to different past lives. So that information was also coming forward more than likely,
So I had a similar thing when I was about the same age. We would visit my uncle's farm in northern Pennsylvania. And I would go to the cemetery, old cemetery. It was beside his farm.
Oh, wow.
And I'd go and I just walk by and I'd sit, touch the gravestone. And the whole story of their lives would come to me. And then I'd go to the next one. And
that's psychometry. That's the ability to hold an object in your fingers or your palm of your hand and know instantaneously the entire story of that particular object. Which in this case, since it was a gravestone, of course it was. If the person, more than likely, you were having a psychic connection with a departed spirit from the other side, and they were basically, when you came to their gravestone, they were basically intuitively telling you their story, even though actually physically you were touching the gravestone itself. So it's kind of a combination of the two. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
You're picking up on the grave as well as the person that was interred.
You're teaching me something about my own abilities because I didn't even know that was possible. See, this will be this is like a torch. Your story is a torch that's going to light all these people their stories, and that are listening to this, and we're going to become aware that this is possible. I'm grateful for you sharing and breaking it down and having this awareness. So you didn't know much about yourself, right? Because you're isolated in this boarding school.
Right.
And then how does your great-grandmother, first of all, okay, with the languages, did you speak any of these languages with anybody else, or did you keep that to yourself?
My grandparents, when I would be in their presence at their home, would speak Gaelic, which is natural Irish, okay? And they did this because when they were cussing or they were having heated conversations or whatever, they would do this so that me as an infant naturally would not be cognizant of it. You know what I'm saying? Little did they know that I was interpreting exactly what they were saying. And so I picked up Gaelic over a period of time as well.
You have a very strong accent, even in your natural speech. And you were born in Santa Monica. So that's what I'm wondering. How did you come by this strong accent, even though you're totally Americanized?
Because my grandmother was Irish by descent, and my grandfather was half Irish, half English. And my mother also spoke a bit of Gael every once in a great while. But again, like I said, this was very interspersed. So again, it would probably attest to the fact that, I must have had lifetimes. And I've always been, matter of fact, it's on my bucket list. I have yet to set foot on the Emerald Isle, but I intend not only to set foot, but possibly even acquire dual citizenship and own property over there, because my ancestors all have castles and property and were royals and all kind of different things down through history over in the UK, basically. Because I'm 50% Irish, 32% Scotch, 18% English, and the rest is Welsh. I am definitely a Heinz UK.
Right. I have similar, and I know that one of my grandfathers on my father's side left Dublin. But I'm going to work with my sister. She did all the ancestry because she's she's a converted Mormon, and they're supposed to do that. But anyway, we probably have we're related. We're probably related.
That's entirely possible. The last names and the houses of heritage that basically have come in through my blood basically are Regans, Regan, and Hogans, which would have been Ogan, Ogan, which is naturally both, because there are Ogans that are Irish and there are Hogans that are English. And then, of course, the H was receptive when my grandfather came to this country. And the Regans, of course, is my grandmother's side. And her mother, who is my great-grandmother, is the one basically that found out where they had put me. And that's how she knew where to locate me at this Catholic boarding school. So she would take me out every other weekend to her house, and she would basically teach me our family tradition, Druidism, and it goes back as an oral tradition in our family over 5,000 years. So she, too, would speak Gaelic around me and also taught me some Gaelic from what I vaguely remember, because my focus was basically on memorizing our traditions, such as magic and spell work and the ability to control the elements and this kind of thing, which, of course, go hand in hand with the gifts to a degree that I already had. And she also taught me how to control those gifts as well, because, you don't want to go throwing fireballs at people because that might leave kind of a singed impression, if you know what I mean. But It was spiritual. You have to also understand that the fire that was appearing in the palms of my hands is not physical fire in the regular sense. It is actually the blue-white. So therefore, that's why it never burned my hands. And even when it was used in defense, it never burned or harmed anybody, because that was never my intention. My intention was only to get away. The Druids basically were in Ireland.
Or the Hedges? Ireland, or?
Well, Stonehenge was partially created by the Druids originally, and then, of course, it was taken over by the Scotch, and then it got taken over by the English. And Stonehenge itself right now is actually in England. And I went to visit it on my 55th birthday.
Oh, cool.
So that was very neat. Even though it was a stormy, windy day, we had a raven, a very large raven, appear and sit on one of the standing stones. And as my friends and I approached, it vanished. It didn't fly away. It just disappeared. So I'm saying,
those ravens are clever.
Yeah, you got to watch them.
So what does it mean to be a druid, since your great-grandmother taught you about it? What does that, because it's kind of lost.
Sure.
The real
All right,
story,
first and foremost, druids recognize that there is always a mother and father God, for one, okay? They believe that you have any ability you so choose to have, as long as you put forth the intent to acquire it. So in other words, there is no limitation, period. Okay? They were the elders and basically advisors of the community. They would pass down decisions of law or decisions in matters of contention between various village dwellers and so forth. They would settle all contentions, and their decree was basically taken to heart, because to do so otherwise, you would not want to cross and make a druid mad, let's put it that way. Because the magical skills are very, very, very well honed over centuries of time. And, the reason that no one has ever come across a written work is because it's an oral tradition. The Book of Shadows, which came about because my clan introduced witchcraft along with druidry, which witchcraft, of course, has the habit of creating a book of shadows or a book of spells. Well, the one that had been handed down from generation to generation, unfortunately, was cremated with my great-grandmother when she passed. Now, the interesting thing is, she told me in no uncertain terms that she was going to keep with me as my consult and my advisor, and also watch over me until I reached the age of 12. And the manner in which she died at the age of 103, and wow. I was 7 years old. I was 7 years old when she died. And, of course, we did a traditional Gaelic wake, which basically you set the dead at the end of the table, and you set a platter of food and a drink in front of them, and then basically the rest of the family gathered around, and we all drink ale, and we drink, have basically a celebration of their life. And then in turn, depending on what the family tradition is or what the family's wishes are, in this case, my great-grandmother had decreed by will that she wanted to be cremated. So we cremated her, and then in turn her ashes were scattered to the sea. But while she was being burned, the 5,000-year-old Book of Shadows, well, I don't know that the book itself was actually that ancient. Rather, the knowledge that was contained in the book might have been that ancient. You know what I'm saying? Because naturally you're going to renew it into more modern pages and more modern books. I don't think you could keep a 5,000-year-old book.
Was there a reason for her to take that with her? Was there
Yes,
a
because
logic
she did.
to that?
She did not. She thought that I was way too young to possess the book because I could not. Even though I had the gifts and abilities to defend myself, she thought for sure that that if I were overpowered by say a half a dozen adults, they would have the physical ability to get the book from me, and she did not want the book in any way falling into outside hands. So that was the main reason it was burned. But it's okay because I basically have a photographic memory amongst other things. So basically I photographed the book, and the book has become a part of me and has been a part of me ever since.
Oh, she might have done that too.
Yep. So in turn, after she passed, she would come and counsel me and teach me through mirrors. And so I had a small handheld mirror, and basically, at a certain hour of the night, 7 days a week, she would come while I had a separate room, needless to say, because again, they wanted me to be isolated. They didn't want me because they didn't understand who I was, other than obviously I had to be evil because, that's the human reaction. When you don't understand someone or something, the reaction is to fear it. And the reaction brought about by fear, of course, is to try and kill it or isolate it or study it or any of those things. That's just human nature. And so that's how the nuns and the priests were reacting towards me. They just didn't understand how it was that when they'd go looking for me, they'd find me floating in midair, or they'd find my stuffed animals floating in air in circles, or sometimes I would be walking along their side and suddenly turn invisible, and they wouldn't know where I went off to, and so they had never had to contend with any child like me, and that's why they thought for sure I had to be Satan's spawn or the son of the devil, because a normal child wouldn't have these kind of abilities.
So let me ask you something then. Okay, so
sure.
How old were you when your great-grandmother died? I'm just trying to get the timeline here.
7.
So you were 7, okay, 7 years old.
Right.
And then the Catholic Church rejected you. Did they kick you out, and where did you go live after that?
No, they didn't. They didn't kick me out. In other words, I went through the first Holy Communion with the little white suit and the white Bible and the white tie and all that kind of stuff, and I received first Holy Communion because they thought they were saving my spirit or saving my soul, as a common expression is. They were bound to save me because they thought for sure that something evil had gotten a hold of me. So they thought they would be remiss in their duties if they didn't attend to my spirit, which was obviously much in need of God's assistance. I graduated from there, and at the age of 7, having been there for three and a half years. Okay, and then in turn I was taken from there to another alleged Christian school. Okay, and I was kept at that. I was kept at that Christian school, and this is in West Hollywood. Okay, the Catholic boarding school was basically more inland from Santa Monica, and the Christian boarding school was in West Hollywood, and then there was another Christian boarding school in Culver City. Both parts and little cities within the Los Angeles County area. Okay? So anyway, so at the age of 9, I was now... Go ahead.
So you went to the West Hollywood Christian School when you were 9?
No, the first one was at the age of, let's see. Yeah, the first one was in Culver City.
Culver City. And that was when you were 7.
That was when I was taken there. I was taken there when I was 7, and I was kept there till I was 8. And then at 8, I was turned to the one at West Hollywood, and that's where I was kept for another year till I was 9.
Okay, now we get the timeline. Okay.
Yep.
So
now, there was an adverse situation that occurred at the very first Christian school, and I really don't like to go into anything negative, but I will address the paranormal situation as far as to say that I was very physically wronged and abused as a reaction to that. If it had not been for the fact that they changed the arrangement of the beds in the particular room he was in, because there was probably a dozen of us per room, and all the beds had been up against the wall. In other words, aligning the wall itself. Well, the beds were changed so that the headboards were just facing the wall, and the beds themselves were going out into the center of the room rather than being directly against the wall. If that bedding change had not occurred, the young man would have been killed, because in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning, a drunk came driving not only through the hedges, but actually into the building itself, and the car stopped with its bumper only like an inch and a half away from his face.
Woo.
And you see, you have to be very, very...
So you had been in a private room, and then when did you get moved to the group room? Because you said at one point they had you in separate from everybody. So
I'm saying that they had several group rooms. It just so happened that I wasn't in the room, but I was aware that they had changed all the bedding arrangements in all the rooms, which there were 3 rooms. I think all total there were 36 kids, 12 kids per room.
Wow.
So anyway, and it just goes to show you have to be very, very careful and mindful of what you think and what you say and what you intend, because naturally I was lashing out towards this individual in anger, And if, like I said, the bed, if the bed had not been taken away from the wall and just by chance moved to the opposite side of the room, where his headboard was at, what you would call kind of a headboard, because it wasn't really. It was these old metal beds that had the metal railings and so forth. And that's what he was in, and it just so happened that his head happened to be towards the middle of the room. Bed had been where it had been, the car basically would have ran over him. And again, you have to be mindful and careful of what you say, think, and do, because naturally there are going to be repercussions. Because the more abilities you have, the more responsible you are, and the more accountable you're held. As they say, the law of 3. What you give out comes back to you 3 times over. So if you're always positive and you're always helping others, then you ain't got no problems, because eventually what happens is you find that little odd things happen in life where you're not really expecting them, and you're surprised when they happen, and they're usually positive. Because to the law of karma, or cause and effect, because if you're always positive and you're always reaching out to help others, and that's the nature of your being, then in turn that nature draws to you positive things, such as other people reaching out to help you. Whereas, of course, if you're the opposite and you're negative and you're always reaching out to be self-centered and narcissistic and harmful towards others, that in turn, this is what happens. You get drawn into all kinds of people and situations that are negative by nature. So you could say, like attracts like.
So I'm going to go back to when you were 9.
Yes.
You said that you learned to have greater love even though you were rejected by family at 9. So your great-grandmother was in your life. She's
already
dead.
Passed, right. Except other than she's visiting me by mirrors, okay? So in the interim,
physical reality in your family came into your life after great-grandma died?
Well, basically,
anybody?
My mom had gotten remarried to a man with the last name Knight, which I bear to this day, okay? And basically, she had forgotten to tell him that she had a 9-year-old son. She had made him aware that she had other children that basically were full-grown adults, 18 and older by that time, but she had hesitantly withheld the knowledge that she had a 9-year-old son, because she thought maybe, he might reject her and not want to marry her, because, he's now going to be inheriting this 9-year-old son. Well, just by happenstance, the school calls to tell my mom that I'm being released back to her custody, okay? And he actually is the one that picks up and answers the phone. And so they go through this big old dialogue and saying, hello, you're very unusual and very weird son. We're ready to get rid of him. He's been involved in all kinds of weirdness. We had to isolate him for a while So you should be aware that he went through self-imposed autism, where he would not talk to anyone, would not relate to anyone, and basically just kind of, stayed in his. But what they weren't saying is that basically they had imprisoned me in a room where I had a television, a bathroom, and a bed, and they fed me through the door just as though I were in jail. Okay?
Oh,
yeah.
God, that's horrible.
I know,
now,
but,
did the courts make that decision to have you go back to your mother? Did you ever find out, how did that happen? That they
the school was done with me. The school wanted to get rid of me in any way, shape, or form that they could. They no longer wanted the responsibility of having me on their hands, basically speaking. Even though, of course, by that time I had toned down my abilities a good deal, and I wasn't me as I had been. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
I had outgrown my innocence and somewhat matured into my deceitfulness, you could say. So anyway, he answered the phone, and they basically convinced him that he needed to come get me. So that's why I was taken into the residence of my stepdad and my mom at the time.
So your stepdad is getting this call out of the blue. He doesn't even know you exist. So did they have a big fight? Was he, I have a son I didn't know I had? What was his reaction?
I'm sure that his reaction was to turn to my mom and say, "What the hell? Who is this? And why didn't you tell me?" And da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, he was Scotch Canadian. And my mom, of course, is Irish and English. So you're talking about a Scotch anger and an Irish anger coming up against each other.
So you don't think he was happy about the news? You think he was angry?
I know he wasn't happy. I know he wasn't happy. And it basically, that anger towards me served to completely separate and annihilate any relationship that we had during the remainder of my my life while he was alive.
Okay, so he wasn't welcoming, and so
no, he was most unhappy.
We're 9 years old. Okay, so what year was? How old were you? What year was that? When you were
1964.
9?
I was born in 55.
1964. Okay, 9 years old in 1964. So
yes, the world's entirely different from what it is now.
Oh, yeah, I was born in 54, so I was 10, and the Beatles came to America. Okay, so how did you get training in Kempo Karate? What is Kempo Karate?
Kempo Karate is a combination of Korean and Taiwanese karate, and it's called Kempo because basically it also combines Aikido to a small extent, in the fact being that if you cannot beat your opponent away from you or defend yourself, you also know how to take hold of your opponent, similar to judo, but more extensively basically put locks and holds on their body parts so that basically they have to physically submit to you. And
Whose
it's a very
idea was
competitive
that for
sport.
you to take the training?
That was mine.
Was that
was
your
mine.
mother's, your father's? And how did you learn about it that you wanted to do it?
A friend that I'd met in school who had an uncle that was in the process of teaching him, and he had gotten proficient enough that he needed a sparring partner around his own age. So his uncle welcomed me in and gave me hands-on lessons, and I learned, of course, a great deal more by sparring.
So they didn't charge you for it, or did your
because
mother or father pay for this?
No, they were totally unaware that it was even going on.
Oh my goodness!
And
you
like
were,
I said,
you were still 9. Now, how did you get away to do that if you were only 9 years old?
Well, the same way that I managed to cross the entire city of San Jose and go from our residence to the international airport and take a plane at the age of 9 with a briefcase that had a pellet gun inside of it onto the plane and travel from San Jose to Los Angeles, which is about 500-600 miles south, and then in turn arrive at the airport and manage to go from the airport by bus back down to Santa Monica, and actually showed up at a church, and the priest dropped the dime on me when I advised him that I was looking or trying to get a hold of my grandparents. So yeah, I had also run away.
You were 9.
Yeah, I was so dissatisfied.
How did you get the money for the plane? How did you get the money for the plane?
Manifested it.
You just okay.
I was not a thief. I just
paper route or.
Well, yeah, I had a paper route. I worked at a church. What do you call it? Stripping and waxing floors. Do landscaping.
Oh, okay.
I did landscaping in the neighborhood. So I would say I'd probably been saving for at least a year anyway. So
you went on this plane to see where your grandparents.
So
this is your great grandmother's child. Was that your great grandmother's?
Yeah. That's my great grandmother's daughter. That's my great grandmother's daughter and her husband.
So your grandmother and her husband. You went in search of them.
Yes.
And did you find them?
Yes, they did, in fact, come and get me from the church, and they took me to their home and all this good kind of stuff. And, eventually, of course, they dropped the dime, and they say, well, we don't know exactly how this came to be, but your son's down here with us. And, of course, my mom and my stepdad are going, what? Because they had no knowledge that they knew that I had been, missing for a while, but they weren't overly concerned with the fact that I was missing.
God, you bad boy, you. Okay, so you ran away from home.
Oh, yes, I was a terrible little child, I tell you. Just terrible.
Terrible.
Yep, like a leprechaun or something.
So they find out, what did they do? Did they come and get you? Did they?
Yeah, they came and got me, and they took me home, and basically, fed me and housed me for a few days, and because they were trying to understand why it is that I had run away, because they really were not. They were not all approving of my mom's second marriage anyway. So anyway.
Oh, okay, okay. So your grandmother and her husband kept you to try to evaluate the situation, why you ran away, and what was the reason? What
the reason was I hated my stepdad. I hated my stepdad.
Did he hit you, beat you, belittle you? What did your stepdad do to you?
He was just very terse and very hard-nosed, and I just didn't like him.
Yeah, not much to like.
And this would resurface later in life where I almost killed him, but anyway.
That's on the road. We're not going to jump forward in time.
No, we're not. No, because we also have another incident, because this just goes to show you how terse an individual he was, because after I had gotten back to where up north, and yes, my grandparents paid for the flight, that I was escorted up north at the beginning of the flight and received at the airport at the end of the flight, so that in turn I would be held in the presence of someone who would hold on to me until my parents reached the airport, because the airport was a fairly big place. And so basically they came and they got me, and once I was in residence with them again, I decided that I would go swimming at the pool down the street, which was a community pool that was 12 foot deep on one end, and the shallowest end was about 3. And so my stepdad got a wild hair for some unknown reason, and decided that he would go to the pool with me.
Oh wow!
So I'm swimming in the pool on the shallow end, and then all of a sudden I start going to the deep end. Now I have always been a natural swimmer. I can hold my breath underwater for quite some time, and of course I love the ocean, and I love any body of water. It's just, I don't know, I feel more at home in a watery environment than I do on Earth.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, he went.
So
with
you're
me,
heading towards the deep end. He's there. Where's he in proximity to you as you're heading towards the deep end?
He himself is exploring the pool itself, and he's going into 5 feet. He was about 6'4" or 5" in tall, in height, and basically he was more than halfway past. He was out of the shallow end, and the pool slanted. So once you get to 5 feet, it kind of slants off, almost like a drop off, and goes real deep, real quick. Well, the boy didn't know how to swim.
Oh,
so
wow.
I'm saying to myself, what are you doing? You're going towards a part of the pool where you're not going to have a solid footing, and you're certainly not concerned about me, because it should be obvious to you that I can have, accomplished swimmer and so forth, so there's no need to be concerned about me, not that you would be anyway. So anyway, he lost his footing, and he fell into about 9 foot of water, and basically the man was drowning. And I went underwater and basically managed to get him to the surface, and because fortunately our buoyancy in water makes us about, at least 50% or greater less weight than we are on land, and so I managed to pull him to the side of the pool, and of course he was able to pull himself up out of the pool. And even though that incident occurred, it still never inspired any love between us.
So he didn't acknowledge that you saved his life. He just.
Oh yeah.
But you did
anyway.
Anyway.
He did, because he was coughing. He was coughing up, pool water and everything else. And of course he looked at me and he said, "Well, I appreciate that." And I said, "Well, no big thing. What do you want me to do? Did you actually expect that I hated you enough that I'd let you drown in the same pool I was swimming in?"
Right.
And so, that again, the animosity was there, So anyway.
Okay, so when that happened, how old were you when the pool incident? You were 10
I was
or
close.
9 or?
I was closer to getting to 10. I was probably past the 9.5 mark.
So
my birthday's in November, so this was probably around September, maybe a couple months away.
So I don't have anything for age 10 and 11. So what did nothing happen, or what was going on between 10 and 11?
Just basically average everyday life. I mean, granted, I met an awful lot of. We moved from San Jose to Campbell, and ironically, I was living in the same neighborhood where Sylvia Brown had created her church, Nova Spiritus. And even though I looked up greatly to Sylvia Brown in my teenage years, I never actually met the woman. And it was funny because now there were, and of course I was doing door-to-door sales of jewelry. I was still working for landscaping, doing the Presbyterian church in the neighborhood, and I was doing lawn work for cutting grass for a lot of people in the neighborhood, and just various sundry very mundane things. So no, other than journaling and stuff like that, and just basically keeping myself and hanging out with friends, just a typical kid of that age. There wasn't, and of course studying the martial arts. Yeah, studying the martial arts, which of course was my love, because I love the discipline and I love the ability. I've always loved and been very accustomed or drawn to the Oriental cultures. And, again, it probably falls back to past lives and so forth. And now I did meet a couple of psychic personalities. So you're still with your mom
and your stepdad. You're still with your mom and her stepdad.
And
did they ever find out that you were doing karate? Did they ever discover that, or did you tell them?
My mom probably realized it because she discovered a gi that I was taking out the door to go wash one afternoon. So she said, "Oh, okay. What is that all about?" And I said, "Well, I've been practicing karate for a couple of years now or whatever." And she says, "Oh, and how's this coming about?" And I said, "Well, it's just through friends and their parents and whatever, and it's no big deal." And she says, "Okay." But my mom did give birth to my younger sister. There's about a year's difference in age between us. I'm sorry. There's a 10 years difference in age between us. So in other words, I was 10 when she was born. Okay. And again, but you see, you have to understand, I spent very, very little time at home. I was either at the library, I was either, as I became high school age, I was either at at school or at the library, or then at high school, and then out at friends' houses, or doing different things in the community that would deliberately keep me away from home for hours at a time. because there was no bond.
So you're basically raising yourself. You're very independent at
Yes.
that young age. You're under 10. You're getting close to 10, and so you're easy, and you just stay away from an unpleasant. What happened to your mother? Did you ever grow to love your mother, or did you love her? Did you?
Like I said,
get closer to her?
I loved her. I loved her unconditionally. Okay, but I left home at 17.
Right.
I
So it
completely
never really
left
deepened
home
with
at 17.
her.
No, there was a very strong intuitive connection between us. But on the physical,
Right.
there was a what you would call an accepted love, but at the same time, not the traditional, very serious closeness that most mothers have with their sons.
So she wasn't a hugger.
And of course, well, not really.
Wasn't a huggy family, or was it? No.
You had to initiate
my mother didn't
it.
hug.
Okay.
Yeah.
You had to initiate it if it was going to happen at all.
I don't think my mother ever hugged me.
Oh goodness! Wow.
I don't think she did. And that wasn't our culture.
Well, were you close to your dad, or? I mean, usually with the ladies,
my dad
it's
was
the dad
my best friend. My mother
okay,
was.
See?
Anyway,
there
my
you go.
story. Someday you'll interview me. My mother was crazy, but anyway, that's another story. We're going to go back to you. So the next thing in your timeline, and for listeners, I have this wonderful timeline that Richard's done, and we're gonna fine tune it, put some years in there here and there. But whenever this is a very good therapeutic process to do one's timeline. But if you're going to be interviewed on a radio show, oh yeah,
you have many occurrences of deja vu while you're writing it, and you're going, oh crud.
I can't tell you how many times I sat there writing up the story and tears were going down my face, or there was a grin, from ear to ear. So it's wonderful to relive some things. Okay, so you had an incident where you channeled poetry in the middle of the night, and you're age 12. So we're fast forwarding age 12. So that would be what year when you're in 12?
That would be 67.
68? 67. 67.
Yep.
Okay.
Right.
67. So tell us about that incident. What was going on?
Well, I had lots of friends, and, we would just play sports together, basketball and tennis and different things of that nature. And sometimes we'd play Army in the Woods, where we'd have pellet guns and BB guns and actually shoot at each other. Of course, we all wore goggles so that we didn't put each other's eyes out, and all kinds of just, little idiosyncrasies. I mean, I was once attacked by a flock of birds, actually a flock of crows, because I happened to go into the nesting area, which I didn't know I was going into. But anyway, it was kind of like an excerpt from the movie Birds to a degree. They all come flying at me and picking at me and carrying on. And that happened around probably, I don't know, maybe a month or so before this incident, where I just had gone to bed one night. And, I like to write anyway. I've always written most of my life, pretty much, either articles or poetry or short stories and things like this that have been published off and on here and there in various magazines and such. But that particular day, I don't know, I was just kind of went to bed in the usual fashion, which I had my own bedroom, and I had French doors, which was kind of unusual because it was a 3-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom apartment upstairs. And so they had, the parents had their room. And of course there was a room for the baby. And then of course there was a room for me. And so anyway, I was, like I said, I'd had a regular day, come home from school, did my schoolwork, whatever homework I had and so on and so forth, and went out and played for a while and then came back fairly late. And when I say fairly late, it was very common for me not to come in before 11 o'clock. So oftentimes I didn't even share meals with the family. And my mom wasn't the greatest of cooks anyway. Now, her mother, she could cook like a chef, but my mom, no. I don't know what happened. She didn't get past the Betty Crocker spoon or something. I don't know. But anyway. So, I was, like I said, I went to sleep probably, I want to say between 10:30 and 11 o'clock. And, of course, I woke up probably about 7 or so the next morning. And this was on a Friday, so I didn't have to wake up for school. But if you're used to getting waking up yourself for school, 5 days a week, it kind of carries over to the weekend sometimes. And so this Saturday morning, I'm waking up, and I'm also all of a sudden I start noticing that there's some kind of weirdness going on with my hands. And I look down, and there's a soft cover of wax on the first 2 fingers of my right hand. And there's also wax in the palms of both hands. And I'm going, well, ain't this strange as hell? And I look across, and in the dead center of the floor, okay, which I had outdoor carpeting, back in those days, that was very popular. And anyway, I had set up like a little stand, and I had a lot of my poetry and a lot of other works there that I had kept organized and so forth. And I noticed instantaneously that there's 3 or 4 candles that had been burned all the way to the base. And I'm saying, now wait a minute, now I don't remember lighting no candles. Wow. And so I go over to investigate, and there's this huge stack of papers, and I get to reading it, and it's all this poetry. And I'm saying, I don't remember writing no poetry. So anyway, I tucked it all the way to the side, and I put a label on it called The Wisdom of the 7 Lights. And just stuck it away and didn't process it. And then, of course, over the years, I've shared a poem here and there with the International Society of Poets, and they've been well received, and I've gotten all kinds of awards, and they've been published in anthologies and all this kind of stuff. But again, that's much later in life. So anyway, I just was fascinated with the fact, of course, I cleaned the wax off my hands and all that kind of stuff. And it was shortly thereafter, I want to say maybe probably around age 13, because I was starting high school. Because, you see, I was also an exceptional student. I was almost straight A's everywhere I attended. I was very, very astute because I had a very high mental level, not to mention, of course, my intuitive skills and the ability to read minds, which I kept under wraps. I mean, after all,
right.
How hard is it to take a test when you can read the teacher's mind and see the answers? Not real hard,
Oh, that's
but anyway,
not fair. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, I didn't do it all the time. I allowed challenges to come as challenges most of the time. But if there were an answer that I just couldn't figure out, well, I might take a peek, and say, hey, hey, share this information with me,
So it says here that you began doing card readings, healings, and counseling. So first of all, how did you learn how to read cards? What were they? Tarot cards? Were they?
Yeah, they were tarot cards, and it was a deck that a friend of mine.
Use?
I started out with the Emperor deck, which is out of out of publication now. But basically, it's like a medieval deck that medieval theme with knights and queens and kings and all this kind of stuff. And it was based sort of like a cross between the French deck and the Rider-Waite. So that's the kind of theme it had or whatever. And I carried it around in the box that it came in. And it was, it had the styrofoam indents where the cards went, and then a book laid on top of it. And I just got to reading myself and reading myself and reading myself until eventually the cards began speaking to me. So I no longer needed the book. And so, I would do readings for friends and everything. And of course, as far as the healings were concerned, that was only minor, like taking away headaches every now and again, or something, something minor. Like, say, if someone had a cut, just putting my hand over it and the cut would heal by itself. Really minor things, nothing really great or per se. But I also began studying reflexology, so I would give foot massages. And without fail, anyone I massaged their feet, they would fall asleep. So I was quite adept at that as well. And then, as time went by, and I'm not going to skip for, I'll put that, I'm going to leave that for a little bit later in the timeline because it actually occurred a little bit later in the timeline. But anyway.
Yeah, let's keep on the timeline. Yes, I'm going to keep you on track. So, okay.
Of course.
And then you did counseling. What kind of counseling did you do? And I started counseling about this time, too, maybe even a little bit
I was
earlier.
relating to kids
start telling me their
that had,
problems.
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, because it was about this age. It was like I'd be sitting at the cafeteria table, and a new kid would come up and sit down, and all of a sudden he'd start telling me his whole life story, and I'm going, I don't remember signing up for this. And he, and usually there was all kind of problems in the story. There was all kinds of, disconnects between their parents and them, or disconnects because this relative was treating them bad, or that relative was treating them bad, or they were getting abused in this way or shape or form or whatever. And, of course, having been through a great deal of it myself, I could relate instantaneously. And that's when I discovered also that I have a great gift of empathy. So I could feel the expression of their story through their emotions. And I had to learn over time how to put up shields and become very guarded, because otherwise you can collect a whole lot of other people's stuff that you really don't want and you really don't need. And it becomes excessive baggage if you let it pile up on you. And again, this is something that I became innately aware of. And of course, at the same time, my great grandmother was still counseling me through the mirror, okay? Because she didn't stop until I was 12 years old. So her insights were also guiding and directing me to some degree as well.
Right.
So,
and it says here that you had your first full body apparition encounter at age 12. So we actually had you at 13. We're going to go back to 12 to that incident with and then you saying that your great grandmother stopped coming to you at age 12. So let's go back to that. So first, what happened with the full body apparition encounter?
Okay, I had a very good friend. Actually, he was my best friend. It was named Stephen, who I'd also been training in the martial arts with, for 3 years, whose uncle was the one that was training us, all right? And next door to their property was this old kind of ranch setting building with an old, I wouldn't call it a stable. I guess I would call it more like a tractor shed, all right, that was directly across from the house. The house was kind of L-shaped, and it had one of the old-timey swings on the porch. Well, Stephen and I were in the habit of exploring things, okay, because I was far more curious than he was, but oftentimes I would coax him into going along for the ride. And so, because I think another one of his friends had told him that the house next door to them was haunted. And so, of course, he just laughed it off and didn't think nothing of it. And I said, well, let's just go check it out. And so there was a link fence around the entirety of the property, but there was also a place in the fence that had been cut open at some point in time. I don't know if it was to free a dog or exactly what it was. So we went crawling through the fence, okay, and we're scouting. We're standing right against the external wall that's closest to the street of the tractor shed, and we're edging along this wall, and we're looking across to where the house is. And this woman dressed in a long white flowing dress comes out the house. The door closes behind her, mind you, but the screen door goes bang. You know what I'm saying? Which that's kind of unusual for a spirit to affect physical reality. And anyway, she goes and she plops herself down on the swing and begins swinging back and forth. And I'm saying, well, are you, I'm squinting my eyes and rubbing my eyes and all, and taking double checks. And I get Stephen up to peer around the corner. And I say to Stephen, tell me what you see. And he says, there's a woman in a white dress sitting on the porch, swinging on the swing.
Oh,
and I said, okay, now at least I know I'm not insane. So anyway, Stephen says, well, we should leave. And I said, no, man, I want to see what's in this barn thing that we're standing next to. And he says, no, man, you shouldn't go up in there. And I said, well, look, there's enough of an edgeway between the barn itself and the external fence. Hell, I can walk down it, easily enough. And I said, so I'll tell you what, you keep an eye on the lady in white, and I'm going to go around the other side of the barn and come in from the other end, which would be the usual opening, and I'm going to explore inside. And if you happen to see this lady in white get up off the swing, you tap on the barn. Okay? Well, so I'm inside this barn, and there's all kinds of metal instruments for plowing and metal instruments for shearing and all kinds of different things of that nature. And then I get to the far end of the barn, which is the wall that we were standing right outside of that's closest to the street. And there were all kinds of antique pictures. And sure enough, there was a picture of this lady dressed in a white dress. and it looked identical to
Oh.
the woman who was swinging on the porch. And just as I make this recognition, I feel this hand come up and tap me on my right shoulder. And I like to have jumped out of my skin, and I turn around, and there stands the lady in white. And I mean to tell you, I beelined right through her barn and never did return.
I hate when they do that.
So that was my, yes, I know. That just tends to freak you out. I mean, even though, you know, you're psychically aware and intuitive and the whole 9 yards, you can have all these gifts, but, you know, spirit, when they want to approach you and sneak up on you, they still can get away with it sometimes. And Stephen never did pound on the barn wall, so I had no idea she was coming. And of course, she didn't have to walk. She didn't have to walk around to the physical entrance and come in through the physical entrance. She just walked right through the wall.
Now, what was the look on her face like? Did you see her face, and was she like?
Yes, the details of her face.
Expression?
She was very calm and very motherly like as though to say, you know, well, I appreciate the fact that you're looking at a picture of me, but I still don't understand why you're here. That kind of a thing, you know. And I'm going, well, well, yeah, a little apprehensive, a little puzzled, but at the same time, not really alarmed or anything per se. Like as though she knew like she knew in advance who she was going to find. I mean, maybe she was aware that we were peering at her around the barn. Who knows?
Yeah. Interesting. So she's not moved on. She's still staying on the property, but she's dead.
Yes, and I had the impression that she was staying to see to it that the property didn't change hands, because it had already been basically deserted for a while, and I believe it had been put on the market. But I think there was something on the land itself that she wanted to make certain that a relative found, and not some stranger. Some kind of treasure or some kind of buried gold or buried coins or something on the property that was keeping her there, kind of like a guardian, until she could be absolutely assured that another family member received it rather than a total stranger. Because I don't believe in spirits being bound, you know.
Yeah, I hope not. So how did that day end? You didn't see her again, and did you reunite with your friend and tell him what happened?
Oh yeah. I went next door, and of course Stephen had seen her get up off the swing and start to come down off the porch, and he didn't want nothing to do with her.
Hours.
And he forgot that he was supposed to tap on the barn door. I wouldn't say he was a coward. He was just scared shitless, you know.
I know. I'm just making fun of him.
But anyway,
okay.
I know.
So anything else happened with the lady? Then we're going to go to why your great grandmother left.
I think there might have been one night where it was a very strong moonlit night, and I do believe we took pictures of it. And of course, unfortunately, the pictures have gotten lost over the years. But yeah, we did actually manage to take a picture of her that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that neither one of us were hallucinating. So.
Oh, that would have been great to have. Yeah, but yeah,
sure.
I know. I have so much stuff that's gotten lost over time since I moved. Okay, so what happened with great grandma? She's sitting in your life. You're seeing her using the mirror, and then all of a sudden, what happens? She stops coming, or does she say goodbye?
No, she comes to me as I'm resting one night in my bed, and she stands at the foot of the bed, and she says, "Now, Ricky," because that's what she called me, "I want you to get up off the bed and come and hug me, because this is going to be the last time that you will see me. Now, understand that I will always be watching over you, and there may be times that I will come to visit you in spirit. And no, I will not be using a mirror. You will now perceive me from this point forward as I am standing before you." So she was basically another full-body apparition, but of course, being a familiar one, I didn't think anything of it. You see what I'm saying? And yes, when I hugged her, I could actually feel her physical self, and then she just kind of threw the air, and that was it. Now, since then, there's probably been over 100 visits over time, you know. And usually it occurs when, she still visits me to this day.
And when does it occur? You said usually occurs when...
Usually it's under high times of stress or high times of turmoil, or, you know, where serious decisions have to be made or whatever. She'll come and basically kind of whisper in my ear or, you know, talk to me intuitively.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Well, she told me
did she ever
was
give
going
you a
to be a
reason
guardian.
why she had to leave from that level and switch to the occasional?
She said
visitation?
basically that she would be back much later in life to bring me through the cycles of life as far as our tradition was concerned. Like I would be saged at the age of 55, and then in turn there would be other things and responsibilities that would be given into my hands that I was not to know of yet. So it's basically like she was schooling me, schooled myself, but she was doing it from a distance. In other words, always watching and always there, but not always close enough to be detected.
Okay, I want to go over this one incident at age 14, and then I see that Bruce came. So after we do this 14, we'll have. He didn't think he was going to make it because it was Christmas, but I guess he could make it. So we'll have Bruce give you some feedback if you want, and maybe ask you a question or two. Okay, so let's go over your age 14. You died and came back. You were legally dead for 33 minutes. Okay. So tell us what happened. Why did you die? What happened? Did you do something?
By now I'm in high school, okay? And we're now living in our own house. We're no longer in an apartment. We're now living in our own house, all right? And the house is a 5-bedroom house. It's a very large house on about an acre and a half of land. And, excuse me. Anyway, I come home one afternoon from school, and I had decided that I wanted to go swimming. So I changed into swimming trunks and was coming down the hall in a tank top with a towel over my shoulder, and my mom is standing at the other end of the hall, sweeping her broom on the hallway, because the hallway was wood floors, and the house was kind of a division between wood floors and carpet and so forth. But anyway, she was sweeping away, and she looks down the hallway at me, and I have suddenly just froze in place and fallen to the floor, and every muscle in my body has completely contracted me into the fetal position. And no matter how I tried, muscular-wise or anything else to break the hold that my muscles seemed to be contorted into, I could not move. And, of course, she dropped the broom and comes running. She comes running towards me, and she says, "What's going on?" And I said, "I don't know. All I know is the pain's very intense, and I don't understand what's happening." So she immediately calls her husband, my stepdad at work, lets him know what's going on, and, of course, he advises call an ambulance. So they call an ambulance, and the ambulance takes me to the hospital. Well, when they're getting me into the hospital, of course, they're giving me all kinds of muscle relaxants so that in turn they can straighten out my body. Now, doctor's assessment was that I had appendicitis, and possibly my appendix may well have burst, because naturally when toxic fluids get into your body's natural reaction is to basically curl up or fester into a tight position so that it contracts around whatever the toxic is, so it can attack the toxic in strength and disband it from being inside you. So anyway, they gave me all these muscle relaxants and all this good stuff, and of course they're rushing me into surgery because they think that I'm about to die, because that's usually what happens when a person bursts their appendix. They usually die within a few hours. Right. Because of all the toxin that's let out. Because the reason that we have an appendix is basically it's supposed to take away from our insides anything that is severely toxic, such as poisons and that kind of thing, and store them away. And basically it's like a one-way container. In other words, things go in but they don't come out. And it's like a little bag, okay? And the only reason I know that for certainty is because as all this surgery was going on beneath me, I was above it watching the whole thing, listening to the whole conversation, seeing every move the doctor made, the nurses made, and the whole 9 yards. So I'm floating above my body because naturally I'm anesthetized, And they've got me all relaxed, and the doctor, of course, peels me open, and he looks at my appendix. My appendix is perfectly healthy, and he says, since I'm in here already, I'm just going to go ahead and take it out anyway, and that might prevent some future kind of problem going on. So he removes my appendix, and he still can't figure out what the hell's going on because there's no physical explanation as to why I reacted the way I reacted. So he's starting to peel me open a little bit more, and he's doing kind of exploratory surgery. And he's looking around inside of me, and he doesn't really feel anything, see or feel anything out of the way, organ-wise and so forth. Not detecting any tumors or anything like that. And so he and this is going on for like, I don't know. I couldn't really tell you how much time because I wasn't looking at a clock, but I would say at least an hour or more that I was in open surgery, okay?
Right.
And I mean, I was being monitored and all that good stuff in a complete surgical room, and it was, all tidied and carrying on, and everything was sterile as far as I could tell. And the surgeon was a German, and you could tell he was a German because he spoke with a very heavy German accent. So when he was telling the nurses, well, hand me such and such, you could tell that he was German. And so anyway, he's decided, well, damn, I'm an anomaly. There's no explanation as to why my body curled up into a fetal position, and they're going to have to run all kinds of tests, all kinds of blood tests, and all kinds of other enzyme tests and all kinds of stuff in order to try and determine what the hell happened to me. So he's about to close up when a green slimy tentacle wraps around his pinky finger. Okay? And the doctor freaks because you're not supposed to have tentacles inside you. Hello? So anyway, he opens me up a bit farther, and there's kind of like almost a plum-sized growth, basically, that's got not one but a half a dozen of these tentacles coming out of it. And the longest of which ends up being about 12 to 14 inches, which means that had anyway the tentacle been allowed to continue growing, it probably would have been around my heart in the next day or two and would have killed me anyway. You still there? Okay, all right. I didn't know what that loud noise was.
I don't know.
So anyway,
was
yeah, I know.
So go ahead.
Continue. So anyway,
my phone is here, so it must be somebody emailed me or something. Who knows? Keep going.
That could be. So, I feel myself being pulled up through the roof of the hospital. Okay. In other words, evidently, I guess this is when I had died, and I was pulled up magnetically, so to speak, up through the roof of the hospital into the night sky, and across a vast array of night sky or whatever into a multicolored tunnel. And the walls of this tunnel were alive, and the colors were vibrating, and it was kind of twisty-turny, and I went to the end of the tunnel, and there stood an angel on each side. Now, you have to remember, okay, this is now, yes, I'm a Druid,
right,
3/4 of the way, but there's also that 25% Catholic Christian, that was kind of pounded into me when I was younger, saying, well, this is what God looks like. He's a very old, wise man with a big, long, white beard, and he looks very wise, and he will school you, and he will decide what happens to you next. And I'm saying, oh, okay then. So anyway, the angels are standing in there, and the angels, look like a common angel, big white wings and white garments and all this kind of stuff. And I come to the end of the tunnel, which is where they're standing at, and I peer past them, and all of a sudden a cobblestone paved veranda shows up out of nowhere. Okay? And at the opposite end of this veranda, which I'm going to guesstimate about 20, 30 feet, roughly speaking, okay, is a redwood chair, an old-timey redwood chair that, is very thick arms, thick legs, and a very, very stiff, very large backing on it. And around the arms and the legs of this chair are rose vines, and the roses are opening and closing. And I'm going, oh, well, ain't this interesting? And I no sooner have this thought than this entity garbed in a white robe with a white hood, okay, appears to my immediate right, and where the face and the hands and the feet should be is nothing but gold white light. And I'm saying, okay, so who do we have coming here? And I said, well, whoever it is very energetic in form. Could this be God? I don't know. Maybe. So anyway, he comes around and he sits in the chair, all right? And as he sits in the chair, of course, his feet take formation, and he's barefooted, and he has very large hands, and his face, like I say, looks like this very, very old, wise man, something like you see in the face of a grandfather, with this very, very long white beard that's coming down into the middle of, or past the middle of his chest. And all of a sudden, I feel magnetically pulled towards him, okay? And as I'm being pulled towards him, all of a sudden, this sensation of immense love and bliss and euphoria and ecstasy and all of these grandiose words which are attempting to put an explanation to the way that I'm feeling, which really cannot be explained other than to say I had never felt so good in all of my life. In other words, it was like I had finally found love. I had finally found love and acceptance, and it was just pouring and racing right through me. Pulled to his presence, and he looks at me and he smiles, and he puts his left hand up into the air, and as he does so, this humongous book appears out of nowhere, and he puts his book down in his lap, and he flips open the book, and of course I'm looking at him, I look into the book, and he's of course looking at me and then looking in the book, and he's flipping the pages. And on each page in this book is an entire display of a person's birth to the present moment in their life, in like moving scenes. Okay? And he flips the pages and he gets, the book of life, basically speaking. And he gets to my page and he looks down and he says, starts shaking his head and he says, oh, no, no, no. And I said, well, what's the problem? And he says, you can't leave yet. And I said, well, I sure as hell ain't going back there. And he says, oh, hell yes, you is. And I said, oh, hell no, I ain't. And he said, oh, believe me, trust me, you are going back. And I said, but I don't want to go back. He says, look, I understand how you feel, but I have always been with you. I have never left you. I have always been in your heart. I have always been in your mind. And I have always been at the core of your spirit. And I'm going, holy shit, totally. Well, that's why I always thought that I was odd, you know. So anyway, he says to me, well, you know, according to this scroll over here, and he raises his right hand and the scroll appears out of nowhere, and he flips down this white papyrus scroll or whatever, and he's looking down and he says, well, you know, back in such and such you agreed to do this, and this, and you ain't accomplished none of it yet. So you got to go back. But I don't want to go back. Well, I don't care. It doesn't matter what you want. What I want is for you to go back. And so he brings his right hand down to his lap. The papyrus scroll disappears. He brings his left hand down to his lap, his left hand was already in his lap supporting the book, but he moves his hand upwards. The book disappears. Okay, and all of a sudden he's no longer sitting in front of me. He is now standing before me, and he gently kind of hugs me, and at the same time is turning me physically around and basically aiming me towards where the angels are standing. And I said, hold on. And he says, what is it you want? And I said, I want a favor. And he says, what is that favor? And I said, well, you know, I would sincerely love to know what I really am and what I really look like. And he said, granted.
Oh.
And so, you know, I'm looking at these angels, and all of a sudden these angels are no longer angels. They're just these big, huge swirls of light going round and round and round very rapidly. And so I'm saying, ain't that interesting? Because this is how this all began in the first place. So I get to where they're at, and of course I turn around, and basically he's doing his thing where he's turning back into energy and just, you know, kind of starting to fade away. And of course I'm waving, you know, and saying, are you sure you won't change your mind? Kind of attitude. But no, that was a hopeless cause. So anyway, somehow or other, my consciousness gets pulled away from what I perceive to be my physical presence, okay? And I'm allowed to look back at myself, and sure as hell, I am nothing but this swirling ball of light as well.
Right.
And then, of course, I come back. I come back down the tunnel, back out through the night sky, and back into the hospital through the roof. My body's on a gurney on the far wall.
Now, what were they doing?
Who?
Yeah, what were they doing?
Oh,
were they trying to revive you? Did they?
No. The surgeon was already gone. There was one nurse in attendance putting instruments together on the surgical site, and there was another nurse standing over me, over my feet, where my body was on a gurney covered with a sheet, and she was affixing a tag to my toe.
Oh, so you had died, and they didn't.
I had died and been dead for 33 minutes.
You.
In other words,
wow.
she had already put the time in and my name and all this kind of thing, so that when the body was taken down to the morgue, they didn't know what to do with it. Well, all of a sudden, I feel myself coming back into my body, and there is immense pain. And I'm going, see, this is why I didn't want to come back. And so in reaction to the immense pain, I sat up. And as I sit up, the nurse at my feet screams and faints. And the other nurse rushes across the room from the surgical site and pushes me back down on the gurney and tries to put a hand on my gut, my lower guts and all that, because I had never been sewed closed. So my insides were starting to pour out. So she gets on the speaker, and I don't know what the hell she was calling, but anyway, the surgical team and everybody round up, and they come in and they close me up, and then of course I'm taken to recovery and all that good stuff. And the next day I pester the hell out of them. They're saying, now wait a minute, this man, there's no way that this boy can have this kind of knowledge, because he was so heavily sedated. You could have put out 3 horses with what we gave him, but yet he's claiming that he wants to see the foreign growth that we took out of him. And so I hampered, I harassed them and just bitched at them and carried on for hours. And finally they relented, and they finally showed it to me. And that confirmed that I wasn't having a hallucination. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Now, for the next week, while I was in a shared room, okay, with a couple of young ladies that would be visited by their dad, I presume, and they would play weird musical instruments, like they'd pour water in glasses and do the glasses, make sounds, bringing sounds.
Is this at the hospital?
Yeah, this is at the hospital.
At the hospital? And they put you with a couple of girls? I thought they usually kept them separate.
Well, it was a very large, expansive room, okay, and naturally,
big room,
they had. I only saw the girls when they were visited by other people, and the curtains were drawn down enough that you could see who was laying there. So it was isolated, but the room was being put to the most effective use of containing as many patients as possible. And not only that, but they were pretty much recuperated. They'd already had their surgeries and everything, so there wasn't nothing weird or whatever going on. And I was in the process. I was too out of it to be worried about who was in the room with me for the most part anyway.
You were in the recovery room. You weren't in the
right.
Anyway, so there you go. It's okay. So
yeah, because when I actually got to the so anyway, they were being visited by these people playing instruments and shit, and so then they showed me the growth, like I said, and then in turn I was moved to another room, and this must have been the room that I was situated in, because there was a couple of men in it with me, and there was 3 of us in the room, and I was at the far end by the window, and there was another man that was kind of in the center of the other side of the room, and then another man at the far end of the room side that I was on. And the old man who had been visiting the girls and he came in one afternoon and visited me and played their instruments. And he was playing a saw blade, and they were playing their glasses of water and all this kind of stuff. And they brought me cookies, some kind of Danish cookies or something, at least from what I vaguely remember. Anyway, they were the only visitors that I had for approximately the 2.5 weeks that I was in the hospital.
Oh, my God.
I never saw my mom. I never saw stepdad. Never saw nobody. And so basically I said, during the second week, all right, God gave me the purview of my entire life that was about to transpire in front of me. And he allowed me to have this knowledge to show me implicitly the ways in which I had guaranteed that I would undertake certain kinds of adventures or certain kinds of quests or accomplish certain kinds of feats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was like him who was reaching down and saying, look, I'm going to share this with you just to convince you I knew what I was doing when I sent you back. Kind of like a sarcastic joke in a way. And I said, well, okay, God's got a sense of humor. What else is new? Well, at the end of the week, that entire knowledge of everything that was about to unwind in front of me was taken from me. And there's good reason for that, because if I had known what I was about to live out, there'd be no point in living it.
Right.
I mean,
right.
you know, if you wake up in the morning and you know exactly what's going to happen during the day, you could then mess things up grandly, because you could say, oh, no, I ain't going there, and I ain't going to do this, and I ain't going to do that, and stay at home or do whatever. And then in turn, the lessons that were to be ascertained during these incidents, experiences, and so forth would not be ascertained, because you would have lost out, missed out, or deliberately withheld yourself from experiencing.
Right.
But he did say, all right, now I will allow you to keep one piece of information, and I hope you know and understand that you come across several exits in your life where basically you were to a point where you could readily be called home, and a decision is made as to where you are in accomplishing your mission or accomplishing what you came here to do. And so because of that, I will show you what I'm about to show you. So he told me the exact day, month, and time, age, and year that I am to leave this planet. And it's approximately 11 years and almost 12 years down the road from now.
Oh, wonderful.
But again, like I said, nothing is written in stone, okay?
Nothing's written in stone,
everything,
yes.
And everything can be changed in a split second. So, you know,
Right.
I think he did that deliberately, that I never ever gained a fear of death, because as long as I've been alive, I have never ever been afraid of death. And I have done some pretty wild damn things that normal people wouldn't even consider doing, like facing down people with guns unarmed, and all kinds of other crazy things that people just, like I said, people in their right mind just don't do these things because they're just plain crazy.
Well, we're going to unravel the mystery of your life in future shows, because we're running out of time. But I wanted to give Bruce an opportunity, because we're obviously not going to get through this whole thing. We've only gone 3/4 of the way through page 1, and you sent me like 4.5 pages. So let's just bookmark that. I'm going to turn on and welcome Bruce. Bruce Cornett. Let's see. There we go. Bruce was going to come, and then he couldn't come because Christmas. No, he's here, and I'm sorry to keep you on hold so long. With Richard's story is absolutely fascinating. Did you have any comments or questions or feedback? I know you've been here for a while. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Bruce Cornett.
I'm fascinated by Richard's story. I didn't know quite what to expect from the last time we were on your show, and we all didn't get much of a chance to relate our stories. But what you have been telling me, Richard, is very similar to the type of life that my late wife went through. She was extremely psychic.
Wow.
And she had been tested by the Princeton University Paranormal Lab and scored virtually 100%. And she demonstrated all of her psychic abilities, everything in the book. And some amazing things like, still to this day, I wonder what in the world is going on here. And she had a very difficult childhood and life, just as you have had. She was knocked down the stairs as a little girl, and it caused a brain injury that resulted in epilepsy throughout the rest of her life. And then her first husband, who was Catholic, she got married in a Catholic church, and he didn't treat her very well, and was very jealous of her. For a reason that probably most people wouldn't expect, because she became pregnant at age 17 when she was still a virgin. And she actually gave birth. And I've met those children. They've been taken up, and they pilot ships, etc. And I didn't realize at that time, this was back in 1983 and 84, but I had been asked by an invisible entity on a church bus if I was ready to serve God and do whatever he asked me to do. And when I said yes, the male voice said, "There is somebody who needs help. If I bring her to you, will you help her?" And I said, "Yes." And she had just.
Oh, wow.
Bruce, Bruce,
yes.
I'm sorry we're running out of time.
I know.
We're going to
just
cover
want to
your
get
story at a different time. So
right. I just wanted to get to a point that she was murdered by her first husband, and woke up in the morgue about 10 to 12 hours later. And so I'm just pointing out similarities, and I would love to explore more of just these types of people, like you, that I lived with for 7 years. And it's an extraordinary story. And I've been telling it on various radio shows over the past couple of years.
Wow. So, yes, we're seeing the threads of these stories that go through all of our individual lives. And so the more we think that we, have something that's totally ours, it really is common with a number of people. So, Richard, I will get back to you with a future date. And you can see the process we're doing. Bruce, if you ever want to volunteer, I call this the warm seat. I used to call it the hot seat back in the 60s. It came from Moore University. It's a process where you take people there. You slow it down. You unpack the story. You can see the level of detail you get when you take the time. And once you're witnessed, then and people who witness you, they stand for you while you tell the story. They get other pieces of their own story, and it goes, and then we realize how connected we are, and our true oneness. So
very much so.
Anyways, we're at the yes. So we will do this with whoever else wants to do this that has a similar interesting story. So contact me at aquarianradio@gmail.com. And so Richard's going to come on. I don't know. We'll figure that out, a date and time. And we will continue this saga. So I want to thank you, everybody, for joining us for this wonderful holiday season. And may you have an incredible time. I hope 2021 is better for all of us.
If I may,
2020
Janet, leave our audience with some closing thoughts for the holiday. All right. First and foremost, I want all of my brothers and sisters who are listening to understand fully that the only thing that ever limits or gets in your way is you. As much as you can imagine and arrange for yourself to do, the only thing that ever gets in your way and creates an obstacle is you. Okay? We have a bad habit of putting blame outside of ourselves when, in fact, we are the ones responsible for our own stories. Now, with that in consideration, remember, even Jesus himself said, "There shall be those that come after me that shall do even greater things than I." Let this dwell in your heart and understand that Christ came here to tell you that we are all brothers and sisters.
And in line with what you've just said about Jesus, he also said that what goes into your mouth does not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth defiles you, which is another way of saying you create your own hell.
Wow.
Yes,
and with that, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Richard and Bruce and listeners, and we'll see you again next week. Aloha. Love and blessings.
Aloha.
Aloha.